Ashton Jeanty, and Travis Hunter, they're right now the consensus leaders from the 2025 NFL draft class for Heisman frontrunners. But is Jalen Milroe, after his victory against Georgia, did he make a compelling case? Of course. We're going to discuss this and more coming up next.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Locked On family? Welcome back to the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, your daily podcast covering your favorite draft prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your boy, Damian Parson. You can find and follow me on X at DP_NFL. I'm a senior draft analyst, and thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. And you know I got to kick the intro to Mr. LSU himself, Keith Sanchez. You can find and follow him on X at The Talent Code. You talk to him, baby.
What's up, Locked On family? Let's get locked in. This is Keith Sanchez, 2019 national champ, man, and the other side to this dynamic duo that we like to call the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, where we bring you championship level content each and every single day, man. I want to start this podcast off by saying what? Shout out to our everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day, man. Every listen is greatly appreciated here over at Locked On NFL Draft. DP. Get the Heisman polls going, baby. This is a Heisman show, man. We're going to break this thing into tiers, right? We're going to talk about the front runners, right? Maybe a quarterback from Alabama, maybe an overall athlete from Colorado we'll talk about. Then we're going to talk about those runner-ups, right? Who are those guys that's sitting in that second tier? Then we'll talk about those dark horse candidates and DP. I might talk about a guy from the Bayou, man. I might talk about one of those LSU guys as a dark horse candidate. Can LSU go back-to-back? That's going to be the question. DP, you can hear my voice. You can tell I'm excited, man. Let's get into this conversation.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. 2025 NFL draft prospects that should be or are leading the way for the 2024 Heisman Award, Keith. And right now, most people would say that this young man, who is RB1 for a lot of folks, Ashton Jeanty, 82 rushes, 845 yards, 13 total touchdowns, averaging over 10 yards per carry right now. And
which is insane.
It's truly insane. And you know, when you contextualize everything, he's like, okay, who is he playing? Like, yeah, the competition wasn't great up until that Oregon game. And that Oregon game, he put like 190 yards on Oregon's defense. And it's like, well, you know, you got to tip your cap to him. He's getting it done. And most people not just have him as RB1. A lot of people have him as the Heisman favorite. And truthfully, Keith, I'm not against it per se, right? Like when you have these type of numbers with the impact he's had, like, I could see why people would have you as the favorite, right? Like, he has the statistics, the game, the big, like, I guess, prime time game moment. I don't think he's ever going to truly get that because he plays for Boise State. Unless they go on the run and they make a playoff run or something, then people, okay, cool. I just don't foresee him getting that. You know, I'm not going to call that Oregon game prime time. I'm pretty sure that was like 10:30 at night when that game kicked off. Most people were asleep. So
yeah, I struggled to see the end of the game. I think I fell asleep within the last 3 minutes and woke up as Oregon was kicking the field goal, right? Like I was kind of in and out. But it was, you're right, DP. It was a heck of a performance. I'm with you. It's going to be tough getting a prime time moment, but you go back to draft prospect, 840 yards already. Like this guy he's going to clips 2,000 yards rushing if he just stays on this pace. And then, like you said, I don't see any defenses that's going to get in his way. So in order for him to push the Heisman, right, Boise's going to just have to push the production. And, you know, with this draft class, we've been wondering, like, hey, where's the production from some of these players that we thought that we was going to get? You don't have to worry about that from Ashton Jeanty, right? Ashton Jeanty showed up. He is showing up 840 yards already, DP. Like, you double that. I mean, he's close to probably halfway through the season. So you double that and add on a little bit more, right? You're literally talking about probably 25 touchdowns and almost 2,000 yards rushing. That's
in 4 games.
Because
he's
that's
only played
crazy.
4 games.
That's crazy. Let's
800,
talk about this.
Almost 900 yards in 4 games is crazy.
Yeah, no, that is. That is. Let's talk about this other guy, DP. There's a guy in Colorado, and I think after one of his interceptions, right, this past weekend, he hit the Heisman pose
He
too.
did hit the Heisman.
And let everybody know, Mr. Travis Hunter, the dual threat guy, and I'll tell you this: Ashton Jeanty has the problem with the big time games, right? Being able to push him over the top. Travis Hunter does not have that problem. You can
No.
guarantee you can leave it up to Coach Prime and Shador Sanders that they're gonna get some cameras out there, right? They're gonna get some attention. They're gonna make some headlines and get people watching the games. And I just want to ask you, DP, with him, where do you stand with Travis Hunter as far as his Heisman hopes, and if you think he should be the number one guy?
This is my number one guy, Keith, and it's the impact that he's making. I did a stream over a Bleacher Report last, and I ranked my top like 15 players, and my number one prospect, my number one player overall in the draft was Travis Hunter. When you have a first round grade at corner and at wide receiver, it's very hard for somebody that just plays one position. Like, yeah, I'm the best player in the entire draft. When this guy is able to do it on both sides of the football, and watching him go over 100 yards over and over again. And on the season, Keith, he's only allowed 100 yards in coverage total through 5 games. It's gotten to the point where teams, like he went not this past game, UCF did target him. He ended up walking away with an interception, and at PBU, he's given up no touchdowns this season. It was the game before that. Baylor, if I remember correctly, I'm looking at the numbers, Baylor didn't target him the entire game. They picked on the younger guys in that secondary. I think Preston Hodge, and they went after some of the other guys. He was like, yeah, we're going to stay away from him. And it just reminded me of those like lockdown corners, the Sherman, the Revis, those guys where it's like, man, he's locked down the one side of the field where the quarterback's looking on the total opposite side. Now Colorado didn't roll coverage and make it harder for the quarterback. But for me, I look at Travis Hunter. He's my front runner right now. When you are doing what he's able to do, and he's like sitting maybe 2 to 3 plays a game. Like, to go from, okay, you just caught a 60-yard touchdown or a long touchdown run. Matter of fact, in this past game, RJ Harvey had a long run. I think it was RJ Harvey, like a catch and run. He was in man coverage. He pivoted, nearly chased them down. He walked them down and almost tried to knock the ball out. Couldn't get there in time. And then he went right back on the field after running that distance to get on offense and start to drive on offense. So be on that next drive offensively so they can keep their momentum going. Travis Hunter for me is the Heisman front runner, the best prospect, the top prospect on my board right now overall. It's hard to unsee the guy that's doing it on both sides of the ball.
Well, DP, before we transition, I'm going to talk about the guy that I think just catapulted himself to number one with his performance on Saturday, and that's Jalen Milroe. And you're talking about having a clear path to winning, right? And you pulled the stats up, man, 73% completion percentage, 964 passing yards, 18 total touchdowns already, right? So like we doubled it for Ashton Jeanty. You go ahead, double this guy's going to count for 40-something touchdowns this year, right? Talking about passing and running the football. But I look at it as this, that it takes a certain equation, DP, and we started with Ashton Jeanty, right? And I think we're working our way up to the big time moments. And it seems like this guy right here is probably going to have the most big time moments. If you're talking about, you feel really good about him making the conference championship, you feel good about him playing in more primetime matchups, right? They still have, depending on what LSU does the next couple of weeks, right? An Alabama LSU game, right? At LSU, you got an SEC championship game. And I can't even remember if they sneak a playoff game in by the time they vote for the Heisman. I can't remember. But I look at it because, it's a different format and different scheduling. Yeah. So I don't know what the timing of that is going to be. But Jalen Milroe, definitely, I think he catapulted himself to being in that top 3 conversation just because, like, now you look at the path and it's like everything equates. I mean, they still have to play Ole Miss, which people are going to look at and say, hey, it's a big-time game. So definitely looking at that situation with Jalen Milroe.
No, Keaton, you're right. Like that game against Georgia, we talked about it on Monday. He was the X factor. Like, and that was elite performance. I think even the interception, the one interception he threw wasn't even his fault that it was an interception. You know what I mean? Like that was one of the cleanest, most dynamic games I've seen from a quarterback in a while. You know what I mean? To do what he was able to do, big time throws, the running ability, everything, Keith. But You know what? As we talk about those Heisman runner-ups, Milroe's actually in my runner-up discussion. We're gonna keep this Milroe discussion going, Keith. In this next topic, we're gonna keep this Milroe discussion going.
All right, well, let's do it. DP won it. We're gonna give it to him, right? We're gonna give it to the people. What we talking about? Jalen Milroe. We're gonna talk about a couple other runner-up candidates for Heisman. We're gonna talk about that coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. Why? Because it's guaranteed. PrizePicks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off? Which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on PrizePicks. Guys, I'm taking Justin Jefferson this weekend for more than 83.5 receiving yards. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. It is just that simple, guys. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL for that $50 bonus after your first $5 lineup. And remember, it's PrizePicks. Run your game. Those 2025 NFL draft prospects who are runner-ups, Keith, Milroe made your front runners, and you made a very compelling argument simply because he's going to be on TV all the time. It's SEC, it's Alabama. Like I said, he's going to have a lot more big-time games coming up. I think for me, and that's a reason why I have him trending into that front run. Like he's on the cusp of that. Right now, I got him as like my top runner-up. And he's right up there with Cam Ward for me. And I think it's just the fact of that was his first true big time game, right? Like the USF game was a little like they were like USF was giving them work. Like they were sticking with them up until like I think the top of the fourth, end of the third, and then Bama was able to steamroll from there. Yep. And the talent just won out. And I look at Milroe, and of course, I think, like you said, he's got 18 total touchdowns right now. He's probably have like 40 total by the time we get to the end of the season. And I think looking at his numbers again, right? Like you said, 73% completion, 964 yards passing. He also had like over 250 yards rushing. It's crazy. He has 52 rush attempts. I think only 64 completed passes. So it's like he's being kind of that just pure dual threat. And the reason why he's my top front runner is, I think, from a statistical standpoint, that plays a part, especially as a quarterback. The passing yards, like he's going to have to get those numbers up a little bit more as well, especially when you look at what other quarterbacks around the country are doing passing. Like I said, he's dual threat, but he's got less than 300 yards rushing. So like it's not like he's like supplanting passing yards for rushing yards. He's just pretty much doing what he's doing right now. And I think as the schedule gets harder, because I'm pretty sure they're gonna have Auburn at some point this year. I think they might have Ole Miss. I hope they have Ole Miss. You know what I mean? I really hope they have Ole Miss because, that's a game that, you know, Lane Kiffin, his ties. So yeah, they have Vanderbilt. That's going to be probably a blowout win. They have South Carolina, which is a tough opponent. South Carolina's been playing good ball. They go to Tennessee. They have Missouri. They go to LSU. They're at Oklahoma, and then they finish up at home with Auburn. So yeah, he's gonna have many.
He has the Tennessee game, the LSU game, the Oklahoma game, right? That'll just be
all
big
on the road.
And it'll be big from a branding standpoint, right? Like Oklahoma in the SEC for the first time, and hosting Alabama like that. I feel like that's just
facing Nico Imaliava in Tennessee, and Tennessee has a defense for probably the first time in a while. Like they've always been so offensive heavy. So I think for him, like he's right on that cusp for me. And as this season goes on and he keeps performing like this, yeah, he's gonna be a front runner for me. But Keith, another guy that at quarterback, Cam Ward, and what Cam Ward has been doing, and he's been a guy he's very polarizing right now, Keith. 70% completion, 17, almost 1,800 yards passing, 20 total touchdowns on the season. He's coming off a game against Virginia Tech where he had over 400 total yards of offense. He had 5 total touchdowns. He did have 3 turnovers, a fumble, and 2 interceptions. And I mean, I listened to him talk. He's like, listen, I'm a gunslinger. And I promise you watch the tape. I just did a breakdown on him on the scouting room. Go check it out, guys, on YouTube. He's a gunslinger. Like there's not a throw he doesn't believe he can make and everything. And I think with him, similar to what we talk about with the rest of these guys, with Cam Ward, now that we get into ACC play, like he was the deciding factor in that game. His defense was getting lit up by Kyron Jones and Vatek's offense. Vatek put up 34 points, right? You know what I mean? So they go to Cal, I think this coming weekend. Yes, this Saturday they go to Cal. Then the next week or so, that 2 weeks after that, they go to Louisville. They host Florida State. They host Duke. They go to Georgia Tech. They host Wake Forest. And then they go to Syracuse to close out the season. And those are some winnable and also losable games because Louisville's a good team. Duke's playing good ball. Georgia Tech is a tough team. And then Syracuse with Kyle McCord's been balling. So I look at Cam Ward, and I'm like, he's got the numbers. And I think that moment, if he won, I said this on the breakdown, if he won the Heisman, that play where he threw off 2 Vatek defensive linemen to then 2-hand pitch it to the tight end to get to the 1 yard line and throw the game-winning touchdown, Keith, that play is going to be on probably repeat during this Heisman highlight reel, because that was one of those plays where it's just like he was the difference maker. And that's really what the Heisman means. It's like the MVP. You take Cam Ward off of this team, Miami has some good players. I don't know if they're undefeated without Cam Ward.
Right, 100% DP. And I know we're looking at FanDuel's, right? Heisman odds over here in their sports book. And so I'm going to name off a guy that I see on a list. And we talked about the Heisman equation. I'm going to go with Dylan Gabriel. And I'm going to go with Dylan Gabriel. Thus far, he's been playing solid football. Hasn't, been lights out or just anything crazy, right? But he's been playing solid football, 81% completion percentage. That's crazy. He completed over 80% of your passes, 1,100 yards, 11 total touchdowns, right? But I look at this, DP, because we said it's an equation to winning, right? And you have to have some big-time situations. And I believe looking at their schedule, they still have some big time games, DP. Not this. I think this week they play Michigan State, right? Next week they play Ohio State. Then they have the number 24 ranked Illinois. Then they play Michigan, who's ranked number 10. Then they wrap up with Maryland, Oregon, and then they have, the battle with Washington. So he still has Ohio State and Michigan on this schedule. You roll through your first time in the Big Ten, right? And you play good football against those 2 traditional Big Ten powerhouses. Yeah, your name is going to be in the Heisman conversation, right? Like they're going to talk about you. And I even remember last year with Dylan, for those who don't know, Dylan Gabriel was a quarterback at Oklahoma last year, right? And up until a certain point, Dylan was in the Heisman conversation, right? I think towards the back, I can't remember if it was, I feel like the back end Oklahoma kind of sputtered some, but I feel like early on in the season, he was in that conversation, if I remember correctly.
After the Texas game, I think that's when they kind of.
That's what it was. Yeah, because they won that game. So it's probably right around this time, right, that his name was brought up in the Heisman conversation. But yeah, I mean, he has the weapons. We talked about Tez Johnson. Was that yesterday or day before yesterday? Still has Evan Stewart, Terrence Ferguson, Jordan James, right? Like they have some weapons to make some noise. And like you said, he goes and gets the job done. Then hey, you got to put his name up there because, like we said, the opportunity for moments is certainly sitting there.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, when you look at that schedule, that's first of all, that's a daunting schedule in the Big Ten for a newcomer. You host Ohio State, right? You host Illinois, you travel to Michigan, you got to play Washington, who's been your rival for so long, but you also go on the right before you play Washington, you go on the road to Wisconsin. And it's like, man, like that's a gauntlet of teams. And we know Wisconsin's always been physical. They play strong defense. They'll punch you in the mouth. They want to test your manhood. Are you going to punch back? And that's one of those games where they're going to have to fight back early if Wisconsin gets the run game going, things like that. Or defensively, if Wisconsin comes out there and tries to heat him up, get pressure on him, hit him, right? Because he's a smaller quarterback as well. But like I said, all those weapons that he has, I feel like Oregon's offense is just trying to find themselves right now. Like before they get into the meat and potatoes of
they got one more week, DP.
One more
they got one more week,
man,
to figure it out.
They need to get you want to be firing on all cylinders when even though you're going to be home. You don't want Will Howard, Quinshawn Judkins, Emeka Egbuka, Jeremiah Smith, Travion Henderson. You don't want those guys walking in to your building and feeling confidence that, listen, we know who we are. We know what we're going to do. We know our game plan and how we want to win games. And then look across the ball and say, Oregon doesn't. And that's the thing with Oregon, like trying to get the run game. Jordan James is a talented running back. Get the run game going. Get that RPO game going, similar to what Dylan Gabriel used at Oklahoma, and get that run game going. Give him that play action pass. You can use Tez Johnson the way you've been using them, but get Evan Stewart involved. You got to get your other weapons involved, because if you go into playing a really good defense from Ohio State, like for you to be a Heisman runner-up like he is, you got the opportunity. Same thing, Michigan, right? And I think what I said, they go to Michigan? Yes, like you go to Michigan late in the season, and they're gonna punch you in the face. Like that's just Michigan's, cup of tea. They're gonna hit you. They want to play physical. If Dylan Gabriel can go out, if they run that table and he's that deciding factor, he's putting up numbers, he's playing mistake-free football. Yeah, you go from Heisman runner-up to Heisman front runner in an instant.
Yeah, I agree 100%. But DP, we still have one more segment, right? And what is that? That's the dark horse candidates in DP. I'm bringing up some quarterbacks that may be off a lot of people's radar. And one name I thought I would never say, but I'm going to go ahead and knock it out. So stay tuned, because coming up next, we're talking about dark horse candidates for the Heisman race.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get that urge, that hunch in the middle of the game, you can now check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the exact same page where you placed your bets. And guys, you've listened to this podcast so far. You've heard us talk about the betting odds right now for the Heisman Trophy in college football right now. Jalen Milroe at the top, Cam Ward, Cade Klubnik, all those guys. You can get started. You will get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Okay, when you place your first $5 bet, you'll get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed. All you need to do is go to FanDuel.com. Remember, all you need to do is go to FanDuel.com so you can get in on all of the action. Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. Dark horse candidates for the 2024 college football Heisman that are in the 2025 NFL draft class. Keith, we talked about Ashton Jeanty and what he's been doing, but my guy in the Big Ten, Kyle Monangai, 97 rushes, 589 yards rushing, 6 total touchdowns. Rutgers right now is undefeated, and he's the main reason for that, Keith. And I think for me is why he's a dark horse is you look at Rutgers' schedule. And again, you have Nebraska coming up this Saturday. You host Wisconsin, UCLA. You travel to USC. You host Minnesota. You go to Maryland. You have Illinois. You have Michigan State. If there's a chance that you can make it, run this table to an extent, let the big teams beat up on each other, right? Let Oregon and USC and Michigan and Ohio State give each other a loss, that works for Rutgers if they can keep this thing going, because then you end up against one of them in the Big Ten championship game. Because Keith, I think I said this in the summer. I don't like Monangai and Ashton Jeanty are so similar to me in terms of how they win, their run style, like everything, body composition, all of it, right? And last Saturday, while we know what Ashton Jeanty did, like 259 yards rushing, Monangai had probably one of the best runs of the season from inside their own 5, where he just jump cuts, get in the open field, and then he's just barreling through multiple defenders. And for those, I'm dating myself a little bit. If you remember watching NFL on Sundays on ESPN, Chris Berman with all the sound effects of highlight plays, like all the weird note whoop and all that type of stuff he would do on ESPN. I just could hear Chris Berman calling this play on ESPN and all the sound effects. Like he was just pinballing off of tacklers. And I think he's the best player for Rutgers. They do have a left tackle that I like a lot that I talked about. But Kyle Monangai to me is a dark horse. This young man's been playing great ball. And Like, he doesn't have much of a passing game to help him out right now. And if he can keep this up through Big Ten play and they can sustain some wins, especially against big teams, yeah, I think he's going to move himself from a dark horse to at least a runner-up and at least get an invite to New York.
Yeah, and I mean, if he definitely does that, right, then all eyes are going to be on this Rutgers program, the turnaround, right? The story for him, I believe, is going to be there. But DP, I said I was going to go with a couple names. The first name, I said it's going to be a Bayou Bengal. Yes, I'm going with the Nuss Bus, Garrett Nussmeier, right? And we have to just appreciate the stats. And the question is this: can LSU go back-to-back Heismans at quarterback, right? And I read off what he did thus far, right? He has 3 300-yard games and then a 400-yard game. Thus far, he's sitting at 15 touchdowns and 4 interceptions, right? So, honestly, it's how it's setting up. LSU defense, once again, is not looking great, right? So they are going to have to outscore everybody. That's what I've signed up for, right? I sit here, I watched it. That is the vibe out here, right? DP in Death Valley, right? Is that we just got to outscore everybody. And so it's going to be on his back. So he has some big time matchups. I believe they have Ole Miss, right? Ole Miss ranked as a top 15 team. And that matchup is always weird. It's always one team jumps up early, then another team comes back. They have Bama, they have Texas A&M, they have Oklahoma, Florida, right? So there's still a good chunk of the schedule left, DP, as far as teams to play in potential Heisman moments for Garrett Nussmeier. So that's one guy. The second guy, hold on to your chair, DP. Hold on. I don't think you ever would have thought I was going to say this. Cade Klubnik, DP. We got to talk about him, baby.
Wow.
Cade Klubnik. He's a dark horse. He's a dark horse.
Okay. I like it.
I knew this was going to catch you off guard, right? I knew you were going to be like, what? But listen, he's been playing good football the past 3 weeks. Appalachian State, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. North Carolina State, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Stanford, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. And the one thing that, and this is the equation, we talked about this, right? This is the equation that I think is going to help them. Not only is it the passing yards, right? He had 370, 209, and 255. It's the rushing yards. 4 attempts for 70 yards, and then 7 attempts for 50 yards, and 4 rushing touchdowns over the past couple of weeks. So you get this guy implemented as a dual threat quarterback, and I think if Clemson uses Cade Klubnik, how Alabama is starting to trend to use Jalen Milroe with embracing his legs, it can put him in an interesting situation. It can put Clemson in an interesting situation. I think he's one of those quarterbacks that you're starting to see that you get him running the football and he gets comfortable, then he gets more comfortable with passing the football. He's one of those guys, I had a conversation with a couple people, right? It's that it's like a shooter, right? He got to see the ball go in the hoop first. And the ball going in the hoop for him is a positive play, whether that's running the football, right? Him scrambling, getting 10 yards, or a called QB counter or something like that. And then he'll be able to take off from there. But DP, I had to go with that. I know you wasn't expecting that. I know that was totally off the radar, but had to list out.
I like it. I like it. I like the call out, Keith, because for one, it's a true dark horse that people aren't thinking about.
You said it's the darkest of the dark horses, right?
Darkest of the dark horse, Keith. And on FanDuel Sportsbook, right? Plus 2,500, guys. So I'm just saying, if you want to make that pick, throw $100 on it and see what you can get. He is playing well. Keith, I look at their schedule real quick. That Vatech game on the road, and whoever's setting up, as they set up the times, make this a night game. Like that, Vatech at home at night is a vibe. Like, that's a loud crowd. That's a college football experience. Put it at 7:30, 8 o'clock Eastern time. Let the nightfall hit, the dark skies. They come out in their maroon and black and all. Yeah, like, make it one of those type of games, because that defense, as we saw against Miami, they can get after you. They got pass rushers. They got versatile defensive linemen. They got versatile DBs. And with Cade Klubnik, like you said, he just needs positive plays. And when he gets a first down, like, it just builds his confidence. And the way he's been playing, man, like, after that Georgia game, I was very worried about this team and this offense. But to run off 3-4 straight, and the way he's been playing, he deserves to be a dark horse in this situation. And if they can run that table and maybe meet up with Cam Ward in the ACC championship game, that right there is a storybook type of storyline that the Clemson Tiger fans will absolutely be all in on.
Yep, with DP, that wraps up another episode, man, of the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. I want to end this podcast off by saying shout out to our everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day, man. I am Keith Sanchez. You can find me on X at The Talent Code. That right there is my guy, my co-host, Mr. Damian Parson. And you can find him on X at DP_NFL. And like we like to say, man, y'all come talk to us because we like to talk back.
Go subscribe and follow for free on YouTube. Wherever you listen to podcasts, get the latest episode as soon as it is available. Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout for being our everydayers, guys. On tomorrow's show, we're going to switch this thing up and come with the rookie report. It's been 4 weeks in the NFL. How are some of these rookies looking? Is Malik Neighbors killing it? Absolutely. Marvin Harrison Jr. doing his thing whenever he gets his targets. How is Caleb and Jaden doing? We're going to talk about all that on tomorrow's show. So come and join the conversation again tomorrow on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.